All right, so today we're going to be doing an interview where we just ask you about a little conversation about your transition from car sales, which you did with me, over to tech sales, which you do now. So I know that you've had experience doing a couple of different sales gigs, and I think that we could provide a lot of value for the audience for people that this is mostly aimed at people who are interested, who currently do car sales, and they're going online and they're searching and they're trying to figure out, hey, what if I switch? Like, what does tech sales look like? Is it really as good as it looks? Car sales has got ups and it's got downs. There's a ton of people that do it, and a lot of people who have questions about, is there something better out there? So I'm somebody that hasn't made the switch. I've done car sales now for 6 years. You're somebody that has, so I think that's a nice contrast here. So you want to introduce yourself and what you do now?
Yeah, so my name is Brad White. Andre and I have been friends for a long time now, since college. It's crazy to think about. But I'm a senior account executive at a small security startup called HackerOne. We do basically crowdsourced application testing.
So what does that mean exactly? What is crowdsourced application testing?
Yeah, so we have basically, we're a marketplace basically. We have a community now of over 200,000 researchers. And they're all around the world.
Okay.
So ranging from college students that are using this to pay for their college to security professionals that do this as a hobby. And what we do is we provide a platform for those researchers to look at public-facing applications and basically try to find as many vulnerabilities as possible. So when you talk about some of our customers, they're everyone from Uber to Airbnb to Google to the Department of Defense. So it's a pretty wide range. And
so they contact you in order to get a group of people to try to break into their site, basically.
And find vulnerabilities.
Yep. Okay.
And so once vulnerabilities are found, these organizations pay these researchers for their work. Bounties, correct.
Got it. Oh, very cool. Very Wild West. I like it. All right, so let's rewind it back a little bit. So that's what you do now. When did we work together? What did we do together?
So we worked together, man, it's even hard to remember when it was, probably 5 years ago.
5 years, yeah.
5 years ago, we both went to school together. I went abroad after school, and I came back, and I was looking for a job, and came knocking to Andre over here, and we ended up selling cars together. Selling some Audis.
So what was your experience like selling cars? Like, what was it that made it fun? Because you did it for a year, so
Yep.
something kept you for a while.
Yeah.
What was it that made it so, hey, you know what, maybe I want to see what else is out there?
Yeah, I think the thing I miss most about car sales was just the environment we had there. That was so fun. We had a lot of friends there, and for a college kid to have literally no experience doing anything and to end up making six figures the 1 year I was doing it was crazy.
Let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah.
So how long did it take? So six figures, so approximately $8,000 a month straight into car sales. Is that something that that you think that you could repeat if you went back to car sales? Do you think that it was about what made you successful in it?
I do think it's something I can repeat. I think one of the big differences in the uncertainty with car sales too is you can only take as many ups that are coming into the store.
As many customers, yeah.
Exactly. So with that, you're sort of limited to how many people or how many leads you have to work, basically.
Yeah, how many people are interested in your brand? Is
Yeah.
your brand hot? All
Exactly. And I know especially where we worked, I wrote even a blog article about this. Stevens Creek, where our dealership is like a 5-mile stretch, and there's 27 dealerships.
Holy moly!
So
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, there's a ton. So it's interesting to sort of think about that. But I think all things considered, if I had the opportunity or at least the leads to work, I don't have a doubt that I could do.
You could do it again. Okay, so you're making good money. You're having a lot of fun at work. What was it then that made you go, you know what, I want to try something new? And just so we're clear, you didn't go straight to HackerOne.
No, so I had to. I think we'll transition into talking through that a little bit more. But I think the thing that really startling is maybe the best word for it, but I was selling cars to all of these VPs of sales or hot sales guys at all of these startups, and I'm looking at their credit app and they're making $200K, $400K. Some were making like $1 million, which is insane. And some of them I looked up to and I was going, wow, that's a very cool guy. Or he has a way of holding himself that is very cool, envious.
Yeah, admirable people.
Yeah, exactly. And then there were some others that were making a ton of money that I didn't think were even... I was like, I'm pretty sure I could do what you're doing.
Yeah.
So that's when I started to sort of get the itch. That was one, but also just the amount of hours we were working. I don't know if everyone, car sales is the same, but the way that our comp was structured is you have to sell cars to make money. It's commission, 100% commission. So I was ending up working, like I would take one day off a week, and the days I was working, it was like 12-hour days. So
yeah, long days.
Long days, and I think I knew I could make the same amount, if not much more, over time with just living a better quality of life, I thought.
Yeah, makes sense. So it was mostly quality of life, and also the promise of you were meeting all these people that... And I think a lot of this might be a shared experience for a lot of people that sell cars, that meet people. You know, I've even met chief executives of companies. I'm like, you know what? I mean, some of them I've met and I'm just like, damn.
And you're blown away.
You're blown away. No, okay, I get why this person does. Like, this person's famous for a reason.
Yeah.
You know, they've got a following for a reason. And other people you meet and you're like, what? Like,
how did you do that?
And then you see the credit app and you're like, you make, $700,000 a year. What? And it kind of blows your mind, and you have to ask yourself. Well, then you start to think about how'd they get to where they're going, and connections, network, and all that other stuff that we could talk about some other time. But at the end of the day, you definitely get your eyes open, especially when you're selling luxury cars. That like there's people out there making incredible amounts of money, and some of them are amazing, and some of them are like, you know what? It's not that crazy. Like, I could think I can do what they can do.
And it could be my own arrogance thinking that. But at the same time,
me too.
I sat there and I told myself, I don't think there's anything preventing me from doing what they're doing.
Okay, perfect. So basically you saw greener grass and you thought, maybe I want to take the jump and try something new.
And I think the other part of it was... in our particular dealership, Andre was just promoted to the position that I would have wanted.
Yeah.
There was one other spot that, or a guy that had been there for, 30 years or something.
A long time.
Something crazy, and I didn't see him retiring, and so
still hasn't.
Yeah. So there wasn't going to sort of be.
So the opportunity wasn't there.
Yeah.
It was kind of like, I'm gonna keep making decent money, or really good money, actually, I should say, but not necessarily have the growth there that you wanted to get.
Yeah, there wasn't. I didn't see a clear step or career progression, I guess you could say.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, so I think that all makes sense. And the next step, obviously, is the transitionary stage, which is what a lot of the people, hopefully, that are watching this video or not, or at least we're asking about, your experience on Reddit and different forums that have gone on Quora. They're in this stage that we're going to talk about right now, which is the transitionary stage. They've decided, hey, you know what, maybe I don't want to do car sales anymore, but I have no idea how to get jobs doing something else. Like, a lot of them did car sales out of high school, or their parents did car sales, or maybe they dropped out of college and did car sales. Some of them college grads and they did car sales, but that's all they've done, other than some hourly positions doing other things. And so now they're going, okay, this sounds great. Like, how do I get to the next step? So there's what I thought was really interesting, and hopefully you can shed some light on, is when you were making the transition, I was talking to you about it, and you were doing a lot of research, and you were really doing your due diligence. So I wanted you to kind of touch on that. Like, what if I was a 25-year-old guy working in a car dealership, making good money, I'm successful, I'm doing well, but I'm thinking about switching to tech. What can I do? What research can I do? What resources are out there that are going to allow me to really open up and learn about this?
Yeah, so the way that I approach this, I think first of all, just where we live in Silicon Valley, I was teaching myself a ton of stuff about tech just so I could relate to my customers selling cars.
Oh, that's good.
So when I was looking at different ways to learn about this stuff, even if it was just a buzzword that I could drop with an engineer when I was trying to sell him a car, it made me seem like I knew what I was talking about, or like I knew
Fake
tech.
yeah,
Exactly. And so I did that quite a bit.
Yeah.
And from that, I came across just basically tech blogs.
Yeah.
And what I did is I would read these tech blogs every day. I would read new articles. There's actually a web application you can use called Feedly, where you can basically curate a list of all of the different tech blogs into one place, and it makes it easy for you to get
read it every day.
And I still do that to this day. But what I would do is I would read about companies. I would read about what companies were getting funding.
Yeah.
I would read about industries, like what was hot, what was not, where everything was sort of going, I guess. And so that was how I initially started looking into companies. I sort of narrowed things down to, I wanted a company that was on the smaller end, a startup, I guess you could say, in order to hopefully transition faster. In some of these more established companies, sometimes there is a clearer path or career growth, but at the same time, it's hard to kill it there too, because
so many people.
There's so many people, but they've also established this process to a T now. So it's really hard to blow out your numbers when you're at
They know exactly. They can kind of pencil you in like, oh, all right, Brad's going to sell this much. If he's a superstar, he'll sell this much.
And we need 4% growth for the next 10 years. You know, that kind of thing. So I knew that in order for me to make a big impact and hopefully get promoted and get to where I wanted to be, where those guys who have the $10,000 a month, credit app, or I should say, $20,000 a month credit app we're doing. I needed to start there. You needed to jump into...
Yeah, okay. So you were looking for a high-growth startup.
Yeah.
But obviously there's risk involved there.
Yeah. And I've been at companies now that laid off half their workforce. So, it's crazy, and you do take a risk, and there's very little stability, I guess, in some of these markets. But at the same time, if you make it, it's sort of high risk, high reward, I guess you could say.
So were you in a financial situation where it's like everything was paid for, you don't have any student loans, or were you actually in a position where you had to worry about the bills and everything like that?
So I felt with the year that I had selling cars, I lived pretty frugally. I didn't really buy anything.
Yeah.
We lived in a place that I basically lived in like a garage. It wasn't even like a room. So I was paying like an insanely low amount for rent. So I was able to save quite a bit of money. Yeah. And I felt financially comfortable enough to sort of take that risk.
Okay.
But I still had, I had student loans, I had other stuff I had to pay off.
Yeah.
And I was self-sufficient too.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Okay. So you had, basically you leveraged the time at the car dealership, living below your means, saved a chunk of money that you could then take risks with.
Yeah.
And that paid off.
Yeah, it definitely has now.
Awesome.
There were times where I wasn't sure if it was.
Well, so how do you deal with that? Like, how do you pick let's go back to the guy or girl or man or woman, I should say, who's at the car dealership. Perhaps they're killing it, perhaps they're not, but then they're going, hey, I've saved up some money, I've got 20,000, 30,000. Is that kind of what we're talking, like 20, 30,000?
I probably had more than that.
More than that? Okay.
But yeah,
enough so that you had a comfortable, like a year or two.
I even felt like if I sold nothing, I could live.
Okay. All right. So you had saved up some money and you'd done that. And it makes sense. You're making $100,000 your first year. Like, okay, 40% goes to taxes. Yeah. But if you don't spend much of the remaining $60,000 or $65,000.
Yeah, to give reflection, I think my rent was like $400.
Yeah. Okay. So
and I had a paid off car. It was like I didn't.
You had the old Camry.
I had the old Camry. So that was pretty much my only expenses were food.
Yeah, so you lived very frugally.
Yeah.
And so that's actually good advice. Yeah. So if you're thinking about making the transition, make sure that you've saved up a nest egg. So that, I don't know if that's the right term, but you saved up a safety fund of cash, and so that you can make that transition.
Yeah.
So that made you feel secure. That's really good stuff. So now let's talk a little bit more about the research. So you were on Feedly, reading blog posts every day about the up and coming stuff, but I've read blogs. They're not. I have a blog. A lot of times it's not that in depth. So how did you really?
I would say it's not so much a blog as much as like news outlets, I guess you could say.
Okay.
So TechCrunch was a big one I read, and it's just tech news basically.
Yeah.
So when I was researching these companies, I started to just narrow things down. So I knew once you get to about your Series B round of funding, so your second round of funding for a startup, that's where you start to like scale out a sales team. Yeah. So I narrowed it down then. So let's look at companies that have, less than 100 employees that have at least had a Series B. Yeah. Their series amount is more than, I don't even know what I chose, like 20 million or something like that. So and then I tried to look at who their investors were and what has the success been of the investors in the past.
Okay. Oh, wow. So this is pretty in-depth. Do you have like a Google Doc where you're keeping track of all this? Or like
I would just write them in a notebook basically. And then first you have to see if the companies are even in San Jose or Santa Clara, or, in the areas that we lived. And sometimes they weren't, and sometimes they're in San Francisco, and I was like, well, I can't work in San Francisco, it's too far. So you just kind of...
We're in San Francisco.
Now.
You did
I did make a move, but at the time it wasn't. But then it was just kind of scratching off, and then looking at each one's website and seeing if they're hiring.
Oh, that's huge.
Yeah, so that was another big thing, because it could be the perfect fit, but if they're not hiring, it doesn't.
They don't want you.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
So let's talk about that for a little bit. Were you using recruiters, or like, because I know that you can Google online. There's companies that say that they're going to set you up jobs and do all the work for you. Is that something that you jumped into, or did you stay away from that?
I didn't know about them, to be honest.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I knew about recruiters. I didn't know that there were specific recruiters for salespeople.
Yeah.
I knew a ton of people that did tech recruiting and everything, but I didn't know anyone that had great advice about, here's a great sales recruiting agency to work with. So I didn't use them. I have used them in the past now. Okay. And I would recommend, if you can, you first have to sort of come up with your story and be able to sell yourself. And I think we'll talk more about that. But at the same time, I would recommend using them, but also you can still apply to as many jobs as you want. I would recommend, though, with my experience now, that you want to reach out to people on LinkedIn, find out who the recruiters are at these places internally, and leave them a message. Because a lot of times what you'll see, and now that I've hired people and I've interviewed a ton of people now, a lot of times your resume can just get lost, or it never goes to the right people. Yeah. But if you can sit there and message someone on LinkedIn, or you can even find them on Facebook or wherever, it doesn't matter. Just say, I saw, I noticed that you're the recruiter here. I'm very interested in this role. Was curious if you would have some availability to talk about the position.
That's really good. So basically now we've gotten to the stage where you've done some research, you've picked out your niche of companies, like, hey, I'm looking for stuff in series that have completed their Series B, scaling out a sales team, that are hiring, that are in my area, and that are funded hopefully by successful VCs.
And then I also sort of narrowed it down even further to industries, I guess. So I knew security was one of the industries I looked at, and is what I've worked in since. Fintech was another one, and then I forget what the other one was, but basically I was looking for industries that were innovative, interesting, and were growing. So that was sort of my last.
Okay, yeah. So you've made your short list, and then you had to go and apply. Are you applying using, just to jump into a little technical stuff, because this is the things that that our audience, hopefully, who we're trying to provide some value for, are going to be actually in that position. They're like, all right, Brad, I made my list. I picked my short list of companies that I want to apply for. Are you mostly just going on their website and applying there? Are you going on LinkedIn and doing kind of the mass applications, or just everything in between?
So when I first started, I did basically on their website and LinkedIn, but again, looking back and knowing what I know now, I would have talked to sales recruiters, understood what recruiting agencies worked with them. If they had internal recruiters, which a lot of these companies do, I would have reached out to them. I would have taken a much different approach, but basically what I was doing is what you said, applied online.
So would you recommend that to, so let's go back to our hypothetical guy. He's worked for a year in car sales. He's kind of similar situation to you, and he wants to jump in. Knowing what you know now, would you recommend that he starts applying on their websites, or find the sales recruiters?
I would find the recruiters first.
Find the recruiters.
Because they have basically a clear line of communication to whoever's hiring.
And a vested interest.
And sometimes, there is a different I guess, thought process on this, because normally what a recruiter takes is 20% of your first year's salary.
Oh, wow.
Or that's what they charge the company.
Yeah.
So if they can find you in other means,
yeah,
it's obviously more financially.
So for the company.
For the company.
Because the recruiters are... But if it's an internal recruiter...
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That's their job. They're already being paid.
Yeah.
Okay. So that makes sense. So use recruiters. That's good advice. And we talked about all of those things. So I think that once you send in your applications, talk to the recruiters, try to give them a good impression of yourself. And you talked a little bit about having a story. So what's that about?
I think it starts with your resume, to be 100% honest. I think I was fortunate enough that I did really well in car sales. So I had numbers that were... looked great on paper, I guess you could say. But making sure that you use as many numbers as possible and put them into sales terms. So they want to know, where were you? Were you the top rep, or what percentage were you in the country in terms of? I think I was top 5% in the country or something like that. I did X amount in sales per year.
Yeah.
This and that. I was top this month or whatever. However you wanted to describe it.
Yeah.
You wanted to make sure that your resume at least shows that I was successful at this and I can continue to do this, but also using their vocabulary. So sales, revenue, all of that stuff.
Okay. Yeah. No, so I think the vocabulary thing is one thing I've heard other people say too, is that a lot of times the difficulty of coming from car sales into tech sales is, you jump into tech and everybody's using acronyms. Everybody's using all of these kind of internal vocabulary that in car sales we have ups, we have spiffs.
Yeah.
You've got, all the green pea, all these like little terms that we all kind of make us feel familiar, make us feel like we're part of a family. But you go and tell a tech person, every month I took, 25 ups. They're like, what the heck are you talking about? Like, they don't know.
Yeah.
And so how was it just talking to the people that you were selling cars to, or how were you learning this vocab?
What I did really was, recruiters can give you feedback if they're an external recruiter, not an internal recruiter. Mm-hmm. So they can look at your resume and make tweaks if they need to. So that is one way that you could do it, but I'm pretty sure I just looked at sales examples and tried to make my numbers look as...
Oh, so you looked
sales
at
resume examples.
Oh, okay. So you looked at other, tech people's resumes, and you tried to take your car sales numbers and fit them into that.
Scrunch it into a tech-looking.
That's
box,
awesome.
I guess.
So no, that sounds like really good advice. Okay, so that all makes sense. So you've used their vocabulary, you've reached out to recruiters or applied online, you're getting interviews. So I think we'll take a short break. And then we'll jump into talking about the interview process and then what it's like to interview for a tech sales job. All right, we're back with Brad here talking about transitioning to tech sales. I looked a little rigid in the first part, so I got some rosé. I looked too masculine. I wanted to kind of soften my image.
You're soft enough.
Okay. All right, you know what? All right, so let's talk about interviews.
Yeah.
First things first, how many interviews you get? Did people actually get back to you when, with this car sale guy is knocking on their door? This is 2013, right?
Yeah, probably.
Unemployment's not quite as low as it is now. So they had plenty of options. Did they get back to you?
So the company that I ended up going with, they did get back to me. I also was able to get another interview through a mutual connection.
Okay. So worked your network.
So kind of worked my network. And so those were the two interviews that I had. Not saying I couldn't have gotten more, but those, I only did two.
Yeah.
One, I didn't get the job.
Okay.
So we can talk about that if you want to. And then
let's talk about it. Why didn't you get the job? What happened? How'd the interview go? Who was it with? Can you tell?
Yeah, so it was with a company called Cloudera. They're big. They're
doing great now.
Yeah,
they're
like
public.
So
you would have been rich.
I know, but they, it didn't go that well. And
what was it about? Because I think our viewers are going to have bad interviews. So it's okay to have bad interviews. What happened?
I think part of it was I just didn't understand their product well enough.
Mm-hmm.
And
so you got to know the product.
They got into the product, asked what I knew about it. They asked general questions, and I just don't think I prepared enough for the interview, to be 100% honest.
Yeah, that's what we're here for.
That's probably why. So I remember the exact question that I could tell I lost the interview.
Oh, okay, let's hear it.
I mean, I remember it clearly.
Hit me with the question.
It was basically, so Cloudera, what they do is they process a ton of data and make it digestible and can spit it out in a form that companies can use.
Okay.
And he asked me something so simple, basically, but he goes, do you think it would be good to have the most amount of data or a certain amount of data? What do you think we look for? And clearly the answer is you want the most data as possible, because the more data that you have, the more they can aggregate and the more valuable their insights can be with this data. But I said, and I said something like, less data. I mean, enough so that it can process it, or
don't want to break the computer.
I know. Exactly. That's basically how it went, though. And at that point, the guy was like, and the guy was kind of a hard ass too. He was an ex NFL player. I mean,
let's get his name for the camera.
Yeah. But I remember him pretty clearly.
He beat you up a little bit.
Yeah.
All right, sounds good. So, just for the audience, if you're in car sales, you start doing interviews, realize you're not going to do that hot all the time. You know, you're going to have some rough interviews. Luckily for you, it was just the one bad interview.
Yep. And then
and plenty of companies didn't get back to you, right?
I think I might have applied to 10 or something like that.
Okay, so you had really a short list.
I did.
Which is good, because then you could learn the product.
Yep. And then one went, like I said, not well, and then the other one, I ended up going through the process and getting the job. So I was lucky, I think, too, probably.
Okay, so that's awesome stuff. That makes perfect sense. So you applied for 10, you got 2 interviews, you got 1 job.
Yep.
So when you got the offer, knowing that you'd applied for 10, you got 1 offer, this comes to something that I was kind of interested in. Like, when they presented the offer to you, was it just like, I'll take it? Or was it any negotiation involved?
So I think this also sort of shows how green I was to the whole thing. I misunderstood my offer letter even. So I look at the offer, and what I thought was basically a signing bonus ended up being my total commission I could make for the year at quota. And I just didn't understand it. So what I thought was an awesome deal, I ended up signing, and then I was like, oh man, this isn't what I thought it was. Oh no. So
what would you advise that's going to happen to our viewers? So what do you advise those people do when they get an offer?
Yeah, I think the structure of this offer in particular was pretty just kind of weird, the way that they did it. But I think looking at it, I don't think it's a bad approach to have a meeting with the hiring manager or whoever you've been speaking with and have them walk through everything with you. That's something I didn't do. They sent me a piece of paper with the offer, and I looked at it and I was like, oh, this looks pretty good.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah, and then that's how it went down.
Was it going to be well, you didn't understand it, so I guess this is kind of a moot question, but were you willing to take a pay cut to switch to tech sales?
I took a fat pay cut.
Okay, so you were going to make 100. Let's talk real numbers. And this is going to be a little outdated because unemployment's at 4%, and it's 2018 after a 7-year bull run. Tech is growing like crazy. Yeah. So obviously this is going to be a little outdated probably, but you made $100,000 your first year in car sales, which is amazing. Yeah. By the way, a lot of people can't say they did that. And then what was your first year in tech?
So let's say, I think my first year in car sales, I made over $100,000. I think, let's say it's 115 or something like that.
Okay.
And then when I signed my offer letter, my base salary was $50,000.
Yeah.
And the variable comp that I could make if I hit my numbers was another 15 or 20.
Okay. Wow. So
I took almost a 50% pay cut.
Yeah, at least $50,000 less.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's what I was saying. So having that sort of nest egg, or however you wanted that huge rainy day fund, definitely helped with everything.
Is it your experience that usually in these tech sales jobs that there is... Well, because hopefully your base is it's $4,000 a month, right? If it's $50,000 approximately, approximate numbers. So hopefully after tax that still covers your monthly expenses. But you never know with bills and everything what that can look like depending on our viewers, if they have families they're supporting or anything like that. So when you looked at that offer, were you did you just know, like, I'm going to take a pay cut no matter what to jump out? And is that what our viewers should probably expect if they're making $100,000 in car sales? They're probably not going to make that their first year.
I even knew that in the interview process, and because one of the questions they'll ask you is how much are you making. They're actually legally not allowed to ask you that anymore, at least in California.
Okay. Wow.
But that was something that they would ask pretty much on every, like, what are you making today, blah blah blah. And so as soon as I said, I'm making over six figures, they were like, well, don't expect to make that here, sort of thing.
Wow.
And
they cut you right, like they're telling you right away because they want to set your expectations. I mean, that makes sense. So you got the offer, maybe you didn't understand it, so that's a learning point, hopefully, for our audience, that you need to get a second opinion on an offer.
I think that's part of it, but the way that tech sales or most sales comps work is you have a general base salary, and then there is a variable component to everything.
Okay.
At Audi, we were just 100% commission.
Yeah, and that's changed a little bit now, actually. Okay. It's funny. Not a huge amount different, but there is. I believe there's $1,000 a month guaranteed.
Okay.
Or minimum wage, but it's still, you're not going to pay your bills in San Jose, California, with minimum wage.
Yeah.
So you obviously have to exceed that, but they can't, I don't think, pay you less than minimum wage.
Yeah.
So, but that doesn't matter because you'd rather work at Jamba Juice than sell cars if you were making
minimum
wage, right? So, okay, so moving on, just to jump back into this, so you didn't really negotiate because you didn't really understand the offer, but that was a learning moment that hopefully our audience can take some value from. So let's jump into starting out. First, how did you leave when you left car sales? Was it just a 2-week notice? Told your boss you're on to the next thing?
I gave a 2-week notice. That was probably a huge mistake, actually, because selling cars, we were commission only. So I was basically just test driving people basically for 2 weeks. It was so boring. It was bad. Yeah. I mean, it didn't make sense for me to give 2 weeks, but that's what I did. And
I think it's respectful, though.
It did. And
you want to leave
it maintained the relationship at the dealership 100%. Too. So
I would advise it. I mean,
I would advise it, but I remember that time being like, oh my god, what am I doing here?
Yeah,
I'm just sitting here test driving people that I can't sell them the car.
Well, yeah, exactly. Unless they're just
one
right
day
now.
close or something.
Yeah, okay, makes sense. So you gave the 2 weeks, and then you started out. And what is entry level tech sales like? I've never done entry level tech sales. I've never done any tech sales. So what is it like? Are you just hitting the phones and calling people? Are you emailing? Are you prospect? Like, what's actually involved in a? Is this and just to clarify, is this a? What was the terminology? SDR, BDR? I don't really understand all that.
So normally, what you do, or where most people start off, is like what you said, an SDR, BDR, and that stands for sales development rep or business development rep. They're the same thing. Some companies even break them into separate tiers. So there's an inbound SDR or an outbound SDR, and what that means is an inbound SDR will only take or call on people that have reached out to the company, or they've downloaded some content from the company website, something like that. So they're hotter leads, I guess you could say, but much easier, obviously, to manage too. And then the other way to do it is outside, which is basically you're reaching out to organizations cold, mainly through emails or phone calls, whatever, and then go from there.
Okay.
But I would say...
So what's it like? What's it like being an SDR/BDR?
Yeah, so as an SDR, me, I did both. So I was a all-in-one, I guess.
Inbound,
SDR. Outbound. So a lot of what I was doing was writing email templates to get people to want to talk about our stuff. And I ended up working for a cloud security company called BitGlass. They're still around. They're doing decent, I think. So that was cool. But a lot of it was around, first of all, finding people. We use tools that have databases of people's emails, company information. You can sort through all of that. So finding companies and contacts in sort of key verticals or who we think would be a good target customer, writing email templates and then automating that, and then following up with emails. So
different, actually. Very different from car sales. Because car sales, I'm thinking... Introduce yourself, introduce the product, test drive, write up.
Yeah. Well, step one is introduce yourself. If you have no one to talk to, you can't introduce yourself. So
it's actually a lot of just that first 2 steps of car sales is really like you're just trying to get to the product demonstration.
Yeah.
Which is funny because when you're in car sales, eventually you get to a place where a lot of salespeople are sick of doing test drives. Like, oh, not another product demonstration. But really, an SDR, BDR is just all day trying to get that product demonstration.
An SDR, their job is to get meetings for an account executive.
Okay.
So all you're trying to do is the introduction.
You're just trying to get your
all
name
I'm
out.
trying to do is basically connect you with a sales guy above me. Mm-hmm. So you're literally just top of the funnel, and
setting the appointment,
basically. And so your comp is normally around two things: meetings, and then what happened with those meetings. Were they good meetings? Did they convert to?
Yeah. Are you setting good appointments?
Yeah.
Okay. So that actually is very similar to like a BDC role at a dealership. It's funny, that's more. And are you doing most of your stuff on email, or is there a lot of outbound phone calls?
I found more success in email just because I could hit more people at once.
Yeah.
So you can automate that too. So what I would do is I would write 4 to 5 emails, and I still do this today. I'd write 4 to 5 emails in advance.
Yeah.
I set how the length of the whole thing.
Yeah.
So over the course of 5 weeks, I want to send 5 emails.
Yeah.
And then schedule them off, and they just sort of run in the background, and people, respond or say, I don't want to talk to you. Please take me off your list.
Delete,
please.
Unsubscribe.
Yeah, exactly. So that happens a lot, but that was basically what I did. And then you also have analytics around the emails. Who's opening it? Who's not opening it?
Well, it's a tech company.
Yeah.
This is what they're for. Yeah.
And so as soon as I saw someone had opened an email more than 3 times, I would try to call them.
Okay. So you're like, okay, this person was a little bit big brother, but that's what it's all about, right? Now, jumping back to, you said earlier in our first part, in the transitionary stage, you were making a short list of high growth startups that have Series B funding. You said they're growing a sales team, hopefully less than 100 people, all that stuff that you said. I'll put a list in the description so people can take some notes. But what about the value in, because you might end up at one of these tech companies, what I'm trying to say, and your product's just not hot. But comparatively, like, if you do somehow get an entry level job at a Google or maybe even something just more well known like a Palo Alto Networks.
Yeah.
Like, I think probably setting the appointment, like, they're gonna have heard of Google, they've heard of Palo Alto Networks, so getting that appointment is going to be easier, and therefore, like, the transition would be easier. What did you think about that? Well,
your quota is higher too.
So
you have to think about,
on the flip side,
that aspect of it, because people know Palo Alto Networks or some big name tech company. They have it figured out, and so that was what I was sort of telling or trying to elaborate on earlier, was that at these larger companies, they have their process so fine-tuned that they can probably say to a high degree of certainty that the max number of meetings you can get is X.
Whereas startup, you take more risk, but you have more reward potentially.
Yeah, and I blew it out there. I did really well. I think I did 200% pretty much every quarter.
Wow.
Over 200.
Which is not something that's going to happen at one of those big firms, because they're not going to ever have let you do that. They're going to have set up the boundaries.
Or it was even, you'll see this with a lot of tech companies too, if you're doing too well, then they break up your patch and give you they give you less opportunity, basically. Or they try to hire
keep you in a financial lane.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so I was lucky enough to do really well during that year I was there. And then I was offered a promotion, but our product wasn't selling. So
you're setting a lot of appointments.
I was setting a ton of appointments,
but they're not converting.
But they weren't converting into to meetings, or to opportunities or closed business. And so I did everything. I worked a lot with my VP of sales to feel like I was in a good position to be promoted. I did really well. They offered me a promotion, and I said no. Actually,
wow,
it was it was interesting. But I said no because we weren't selling anything. And so what I was concerned about was, if it's my first closing role in tech sales and I say my numbers are garbage or not doing well, and no one was doing well. It wasn't like there was a few people and I could try to replicate what they were doing.
It's like it wasn't.
No one was doing well. And so instead I decided it would be smarter to work at a bigger company or a more well-known company, still in a small lane. I think they were 300 employees.
What company are we talking about now?
So this company is called Tanium. And so now they're actually I think they're the highest valued cybersecurity startup in the world.
That's the one that you were at?
So I transitioned from my company I was at, BitGlass.
Don't hit that one. So make a wild noise.
Okay.
Yeah.
So BitGlass.
So BitGlass is the place that wasn't...
That where I went from car sales to.
Okay.
And so then I was offered a promotion. I did
at BitGlass.
At BitGlass. I said no.
Okay.
And I ended up going to Tanium.
Okay, and so you just said, you know what, I don't even want... And then, so did you go into a closing role at Tanium, or you went back to...
I went back to a BDR role again.
Wow. So that's the thing with tech sales. It's like, whereas, I can look at the, how many Audis are being sold, and I can figure it out pretty quickly.
Yeah. If
you want to jump into the high risk, high reward startups, you don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, I was lucky and unlucky, I guess, at the same time, because Tanium, they only sell to the largest organizations in the world. They focus on Fortune 50 companies.
Wow.
So they do extremely well, and their sales numbers are insane. I think the average deal size there was about $2 million when I left.
Wow.
So, I mean, this is big time software now, and I'm reaching out to big organizations that everyone knows. Yeah. And that was also sort of a step up in responsibility. Before it was, as long as they have 100 employees or whatever, we'll talk to them. Yeah. And now I'm reaching out to the biggest companies in the world.
Totally different perspective.
Totally different, just totally different everything.
Yeah.
And so I looked at that as a better opportunity for myself. And again, hopefully the goal was to get into a closing role. But enterprise, it was... And I think I was an enterprise SDR or something like that. And the money was also much better. So it was...
You understood your offer this time?
Yeah, I understood it much better. But it was 60... I think my base was 60K, and my variable comp was 60.
Okay, so you're back to like being able to... You're able to surpass what you made in car sales, which is obviously where you want to be.
Yeah, and that was sort of the goal, obviously. So.
Okay, that makes sense. And then... just so jumping back into starting out the section that we really want to hone in on, because this is a pretty targeted interview for people in car sales looking to potentially look at a tech sales job or a different job. So pretty small niche of people, and I'm mostly interested in like what skills are they going to bring from car sales into tech sales in this entry-level SDR, BDR role, whatever you want to call it, where they're setting their appointment setters. Like, what are they going to... Because if you're used to standing in front of a customer, no matter how, high-end the customer is, doesn't matter what you're selling, you're standing in front of them. You can impress them, right? You can sell your personality really easily. You're on email, you're making templates at your new role in a tech sales job, just like hopefully some of our watchers will be. Like, how do you set yourself apart? Like, everybody can make a template.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me was I established a process, and you have to do that. And I think if even in car sales or any sales, you have some form of process, right?
Yeah.
Like you have, if you don't, please start.
Call me. No.
Yeah. But basically, I had a process that I followed up when I was selling cars. I had a follow-up process, and all I basically did was sort of transition a similar process I had when I was following up with customers that left the dealership and didn't buy a car, and turn it into a tech process. Mm-hmm. And so what I did basically is I had that sequence of emails. I told myself, if I don't hear back from these people, I'll wait 2 weeks and I'll write another sequence. If they open the email 3 times, I'll call them. So
it was really dialed in.
I sort of established this process, and again, working in a small company and me doing well, I basically set the agenda or set the process for the entire team.
Wow.
So then eventually everyone is sort of doing what I'm doing.
No, that's awesome.
So then it's like documented, and here's what we do.
Yeah,
exactly.
So I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but at the end of this, we're going to talk about who do you think should go into tech sales and who shouldn't.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I'm extrapolating from what you're saying is that if you're a car salesperson that's just taking up, trying to sell them, and then not following up after, you're probably not going to do great in this role.
You're going to have a really tough time, because it's every person that walks into a dealership is sort of a warm lead, and there's a reason why
they're not all target.
Exactly. And so with with tech sales, or at least being an SDR, BDR, you're not sure who is interested or who is not interested.
And not warm leads.
You're just kind of guessing at some point. You, based on the people we've sold to or who we've had good conversations with in the past, here's sort of a target persona, I guess you could say, that we try to reach out to. How many companies can you find? How many? Oh, so like I sold
to company A, and it's in this industry, it has this many employees, so I'm going to reach out to B and C because they're similar.
Yeah.
You're doing a lot of that.
So you're trying to just connect the dots as many ways as possible.
Which is totally different from car sales. Yeah. Car sales, I mean, because I'm thinking right now, obviously now I've been there for 6 years, but when you first started, like it's a little different now, but when I first started out, I mean, it was a lot. The people that were good and that you saw in car sales that were good were like, hi, like they're really like, they're just converting. I mean, even now I work with people who convert first time customers, and if they, it's kind of, for lack of better words, it's buy or die. They leave the lot and you're just like, wasting my time. And then you go on to the next one. So that person's probably not going to be good for this.
Yeah, I would definitely say no. It's a different kind of persistence.
Yeah.
So your job is just to set the meeting, and you just have to figure out a way for them to get interested enough to agree to talk to someone. So you're not trying to close them on one deal. All you're trying to do is close them on a half-hour phone call, basically. So however I could do that is what I tried to do.
That makes perfect sense. So what then basically the process that you used in car sales is what helped you develop a product. Because you come out of college, you come out of high school, I mean, there's a process for writing essays. There's a process for getting good grades and going to teachers. But it's like...
But being able to document it and being able to clearly explain it to people what you did is huge. And I think when you're talking about the interview, that is one thing that I was very strongly prepared for. Is, well, you've sold cars. How do you think this relates to tech sales? And I said, well, really, it's not that much different. I have this defined process that I do. I would really just figure out the nuances of the product and transition a similar process to your organization, basically.
Makes perfect sense. So that's actually that's one thing we didn't talk about on the interview process is what were the challenging questions that hit you. So we're jumping around a little bit. I get it. You got to forgive me. It's our first interview. Nobody's going to watch this, so it's okay. But during the interview process, jumping back, what were the because I've looked outside. I've thought about leaving car sales plenty of times. Yeah. You work so many weekends before you go, what the hell?
Yeah.
And you think about doing something else. And I've faced the challenging questions. I'm curious, what are the challenging questions that you faced during your interviews that, even at your first interview with BitGlass and then jumping into Tanium and then onward, what were the things when somebody sees car sales on the resume is like, whoa, especially somebody that hasn't done car sales and thinks that you're just a sleazy guy. How do you rid yourself of that?
Well, once I did well at the first company,
it was done.
And then they look back and they go, oh man, you sold cars too? And then it almost becomes like a cool talking point at that.
Okay. But you're just breaking the seal on the first one.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think the hardest questions that I had were really about what do you know about the product? Explain the product to us. Can you pitch the product to me? Because really, I'd like to think I'm pretty technologically savvy, and I feel like I have a technical acumen and understand it pretty well. And I studied a lot now, so I know it really well now. But when I was first starting, it was, oh God, I don't want to say something that makes no sense. And also interviewing competitors and not really understanding the differences between them or how to clearly articulate the differences between them. Those were the things that I kind of got nervous about, but I wasn't worried about selling myself. I was confident that I could do the job, even though I didn't even know what the job was really. But I was just
overconfident.
I was
a little cocky there.
I was just sure I could figure it out.
Yeah.
So that was more so what I guess the best part is. I knew as long as we were talking about me, I was fine. But the moment they started transitioning to some of the technical stuff, that's when it could get a little murky.
So basically when they asked you about car sales, you just tried to talk in their vocabulary, and then you tried to explain how your process was going to translate.
Yeah.
And then you just tried to sell yourself as hard as possible.
Yeah, basically.
Okay, sounds good. So We broke through most of what I wanted to talk about. The last couple of things. So, continuing on, what's your role now?
So I'm a senior account executive now. So I transitioned from BDR, SDR to enterprise SDR to account executive, now to senior account executive.
Oh, that's a whole lot of jargon. So is it a
It's a closing role now.
Okay.
So what I have basically is I have a territory right now. It's a parts of the Bay Area as well as states, and I have any company
that you can find in those areas,
band, basically.
You get zip codes or
right now we're small enough where I have cities in the Bay Area, and then I have states. So Texas is my state, Florida is my state, Virginia is my state. So yeah.
Oh, fair enough. So are you? What was the transition from that like? Is this back into more of a? Is the actual process of what I'm trying to ask is the actual process of closing tech sales sale? It's not like a car sale. It's not emotion. This is a business decision for these companies, right? They're deciding if your product, or for right now, you have a product that is about finding vulnerabilities in their customer facing websites. Is that
applications?
Whatever, okay, and so you're basically explaining to them why they really, really need this and what could happen if they don't get it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's easier because it's an established industry. So people have been trying to secure their applications since they've been developed, basically. So from that, it's a better way to do something that has already been established and people already have budget for. When I was selling BitGlass and some of the others, it was a new industry. No one has bought it yet. And it was around the adoption of cloud applications, which a lot of organizations hadn't adopted yet. Yeah. So it's a lot different in that way.
So this fits a budget a little bit more. You just need to find the person in charge of that budget.
But I would say that the big difference with tech sales versus car sales, tech sales is much harder. Just so it's very clear. Yeah. The hardest part is normally when you're trying to sell a car, there's only one person or two, maybe it's a family, so it's a husband and wife that are involved. So there's 1 to 2 decision makers tops. Yeah. When you're selling software to an organization, I can talk to sometimes 8 different teams. Wow. Just to get something to pass, or everyone needs to give their approval before it can be closed. And at any point, one team can say no, and then all that work is gone. So wow. So I think that's a big difference.
So you do find it, this is something we haven't talked about, you do find it to be much more challenging than car sales ever was.
Yes. I think because with cars, everyone, first of all, most places where you live, you need a car. So,
in the U.S., exactly.
And it's a budgeted thing.
Yeah. You already have a budget set for it.
You already have it. And so basically, an Audi, all I had to do was convince you not to buy a BMW or a Lexus. Yeah. I had to convince you or a Mercedes. And I had to convince you to buy why Audi was the best. Yeah. With tech sales, too, not only am I trying to convince you that you need my product, but I also need to acquire budget. And sometimes it's not budgeted, so I need to find budget. And then I need to convince multiple stakeholders that this is the right solution to do it. I have to present to C-level people, sometimes CEO, CISO, which is the Chief Security Officer. I do like board level presentations sometimes. Wow. So it's a whole different beast. It is very exciting, and I'm happy to work. Yeah. It's just much different because there are some opportunities where you can maybe close a deal in a week, but in car sales, I mean, I have multiple times where someone walks in the lot and I sell them a car that day. Yeah. It doesn't happen like that.
So it's a longer sale.
It's a longer sale.
So you got to be okay with that. Like jumping back to the end of the interview, but talking about people who should and shouldn't do, tech sales. Because I think that the big thing is when you go online and you Google, should I do car sales? Well, hopefully one day my blog will show up. But for now, a lot of people, I think that there's an article written on one of the big, or a relatively big newspaper, or online newspaper, and it was talking about like my experience selling cars, and it's all about like tricking people and all. Yeah. And so if you look at that, you're like, oh, this is what I do, and then you Google tech sales, and Google pops up in a big slide and a pool and like a gym, and you're like, oh, well, this looks way nicer. You know what I mean? Like. and they're making good money. Like,
Yeah.
and like all I hear about is tech. I use Facebook. You
Yeah.
know, like why would I not do this? But I want to temper those expectations a little bit because I know from you and from other people I've talked to that it's not easier. It's,
No.
The slide is just to get the engineers in the door. The
Yeah.
slide's not for you. Slide is not for you. The
You're
free
at the
lunch,
bottom of the ball pit.
Yeah. Sales can eat the lunch.
Yeah.
But you're there to sell.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not, you know, it's, and there's lots of people who can sell. And so you have to compete with all of that. And so a couple of things that I want to kind of highlight for our audience, and we're trying to provide value for them, is you need to figure out first, are you the right person for tech sales?
I think that's part of it too. And I mean, to hit on your point, if you have a hard time following up with people or have a hard time documenting your process or
Updating your CRM.
updating your
Did
CRM,
you put it in dealer socket?
you're gonna have a tough time.
You're out of luck.
Yeah.
It's not worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what that was the feeling I got. And also, not just that, but if you're not okay with closing deals every Saturday,
There's gonna be some desert periods too
yeah,
where
lulls.
I'm not gonna close anything for a month, but at the same time, the goal is that you've moved these opportunities along where when the end of the quarter rolls around, I'm closing 5 opportunities instead of, you know, you're just sort of working each of these opportunities just down this cycle, and
Yeah.
you're just
You got your pipeline, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And so with that, I mean, to give some context on how long some of these deals can take, I think the average deal size or the average I guess time to close for me last quarter was like 60 days, which was pretty good actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's good. It sounds good compared to what I've talked to a lot of tech people, but
yeah.
compared to car sales, I mean,
That
that's
would be
not
tough.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think that my average is just around 20 days.
Yeah. And so to give even greater context, Tanium average time to close was a year to 18 months.
Well, I mean, you're working with Fortune 50 companies.
Yeah, so they're much more slow moving,
Yeah.
but at the same time, I mean, depending on what you're selling, you can go a year without selling a deal.
Yeah.
And if you're not closing business, it was hard to get fired if you were selling cars because there's really no, I mean, we were commission only.
You fire yourself.
Yeah, basically. You quit or you're just tired
You're
of
just-
selling.
you're-
like,
yeah,
or you're just sitting at
your
a desk.
decoration.
Yeah. And so
You're moving cars on a lot. And
I mean,
hoping,
with that, you have a very clear quota when you're selling
Yeah.
tech, and if you're not hitting your quota, you get fired. Like that's how it works.
Well, I mean, as one thing, I do think that not all. I think that I have been blessed, and you were blessed to work at a really good dealership with good management that doesn't like letting people go. But I don't think it's a universal experience that it's hard to get fired in car sales. I just think that. I think it's probably easier to get fired in tech sales than in car sales, just because.
Maybe that's a better way to put it.
Yeah, exactly.
It seemed difficult to get fired at our particular dealership.
Yeah, and I think that more often than not, if it's a mostly commission-based thing, then like, I don't care, I'm not really paying you anything to be here, so go sell something. Like,
Yeah.
The only thing is you might be hurting team morale, but we're kind of getting off topic. Okay, so let's go a little bit further, looking to the future. Let's go back to our test case, done car sales for a year. Going to check some boxes that we've talked about. So I don't mind a long follow-up process. I document everything in CRM. I'm like the CRM god at my dealership. Everybody comes and asks me how to use it. I make my own templates. I follow up with my customers really well. I get great customer reviews, and I'm comfortable talking to C-level executives and people that maybe might be a little bit scary to some people, but I'm confident. Now I'm thinking like, ooh, I know, I get it. There's no slide for me, but I want to maybe I don't get free lunch, but like I want to go to tech sales because I want income growth, because I want to work in a different industry. Just because I pick tech sales doesn't mean I know tech is huge, right? So where do you recommend, or what would you point their focus at? Because I can go into tech, I can go into healthcare tech, I can go into fintech, I can go where do you think that there's a lot of growth from your insider perspective?
Yeah, I mean, security is always going to be
huge.
It's going to be huge. And when you look at these industries, sometimes you just want to look at industry growth and what I guess average spend on some of these industries.
Yeah.
So that's what I did, and so I focused my attention, like I said, on fintech, cloud, and security, and I've rolled with security my whole tech.
So you've been in security. If somebody came to you, let's say, Shaq dressed up as a genie comes to you and he says, Brad, no longer can you work in security. Yeah. You got to work in a different part of tech. It's a weird scenario, but that's what I came up with.
So
where would you go? You want to stay in tech. You like tech. That's what you have experience now, and we're not getting any younger. So where are you going in tech?
I would look at established industries that have begun to, I guess, become modernized in some way. So I would look at products that already have some form of budget. I'd also look at market share. So, for example, Salesforce has, let's say, 40% of the entire CRM market. I don't want to, unless I'm working for Salesforce, I don't want to work in CRM market. They're too dominant of an industry. I'd rather work in an industry where it hasn't been 100% figured out yet who the market
nobody knows
leader
who the king is.
Yeah.
So what about I hope I'm saying this right, but like cloud software. So we're talking, because a lot of people talk about GCP, they talk about Microsoft Azure, obviously Amazon Web Services is the big dog, but Amazon Web Services, I'm wrong here. They own a percent of the market. We'll put right there what percent Amazon Web Services has, but it's not the whole thing, and it's not 40%. I don't think.
But I would rather work for the market leader, or I would rather work for or start to look at an industry where it's undecided who the market leader is, because you never want to work for a B company.
The one leg down.
I mean, because from there you're normally going to be in a battle every single time with another company, and it's normally the A player. And so you're just prone to be in competition much more.
Got it. All right. Well, that all makes perfect sense. So, let's do the last couple of questions. Overall, where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? What's your role again right now?
Yeah, so I'm a senior account executive right now.
Senior account executive. So where else is there to go? Do you go into more of a management position next, or is it a bigger territory, or what's next?
Yeah, so there's sort of two routes I can go now. One of them would be management, like you said, so I can manage a team of people that are also in my role today.
Yeah.
And from that, there are some pros and cons. Obviously, you have to manage, which could be a pro or con depending on how you like that. But you get a less percentage of every deal, but there's obviously much more of them. So that's one route I could go. And then the other route would be what they call named accounts. So from that, you normally get a list of, say, 25 to 50 accounts. It depends on how big the company is, and from that you focus solely on those. And most of the time those are also geographically based. So you would be, for example, you would be the Bay Area named account rep. So all of the companies that you're trying to sell to are in the Bay Area. Or if you're the Tennessee named account rep, all of your customers.
So how's that different from right now where you have a territory?
So right now I have a band of companies I can sell to. As long as you're above 5,000 employees or whatever, I can sell to you. And some people do it by employee count, some people do it by revenue, some people do it by opportunity. So if you're selling computers, anyone over 50 buying 50 computers has to go to a different person. So those are the ways that organizations can do it. With named accounts, you have a much more targeted list of accounts. Oh,
you got it. This is who we want you to sell to.
This is it. So you have 25 or 50, and here's go figure it out. So
that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So I guess you don't know.
I don't know. I could go either.
Way. Both of them sound exciting. But overall, I think that hopefully this has been pretty informative for the 4 people that are going to watch. 2 dudes with opposite comb-overs talk about
yin and yang,
Yeah. We got the prettier one and the obviously smarter one, and talking about car sales. So well, I'm interested in it. I think that it's been super interesting to talk to you. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm sure the 8 people that watch this are going to really appreciate it too.
Yeah.
So thanks for filling us in on that. Anything else that you want to add on what you do now, or anything else that you want to put on into the interview that might provide value to the next guy?
I mean, I think I covered a lot, but I'll give Andre my email address if anyone has questions. More than happy to answer them. So
sounds good.
cool.
All right. Thanks, Brad. Boom. All right, cool.